that we're muted. There we go. Mute that one. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. We encourage you, of course. Today's going to be another great episode. We're here with the one and only Steven Petrow. He's written a book that we're excited to get into today. The name of the book is "Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old," and I'm really looking forward to this. So we actually named this segment "Smart versus Stupid," just because it's a little tongue in cheek, because it is. It's an attention grabber, but it's so important to think about those things. So I'm really looking forward to it. But before I introduce you to Randy and bring Steven Petrow on, I'm going to encourage everyone to, if you're on Clubhouse, make sure you're hitting that little button at the bottom with the arrow, the square with the arrow that says 156. Let's bring that up to 175 or 200 to bring people into this conversation, ping some people into this room, because, my friends, it is by bringing the right people into the right room to have the right conversation with the right people, I should say, that can really change the trajectory of somebody's life by bringing different things into perspective and highlighting things that perhaps are smart and some that are stupid, some that you should do, some that you can't do. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So share this room on Clubhouse. And if you're listening on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, by all means, click share, because, my friends, we can indeed be an influencer by just influencing one life. That's all we need to do. So speaking of influencers and people that are changing the world, I guess, one letter, one book, one smart idea or bad idea at a time, what not to do. The one and only Steven Petrow is here with us, as is Randy Kenneth Jones. So, Randy, take it away.
It's the B team! Yay!
Woo!
I'm Amelia Light with my friend Steven, and I think it's Petrow. Oh, we can't hear you, Steven. Steven, we can't hear you.
Steven, you've got to unmute your mic on Clubhouse.
You unmute your mic on Clubhouse. There's all these. We're teaching you all the little technology nonsense that we're up to today. So unmute your mic on Clubhouse.
On the lower right-hand corner of your phone screen, there's a little microphone. Just there you go.
Okay. It said the host had muted my mic, so I was confused. But anyway, yes, it's Petrow, but Tony and I just met moments ago, so we're good.
So we can just call him Tony.
Actually, if we were in Portugal, that's exactly how it is. It's Tony. So
Tony.
There you go.
Tony.
And we can call me Randy. Tony.
Thank
you so much for coming in. We had a guest who was not able to be here at the last minute. Steven very graciously, with 1 minute notice, within 1 minute, you said yes, because you're a courteous, polite person. You have been on the show before. This book, a game changer for me. Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old. We're going to get to that. If you can hear, I'm actually, getting over laryngitis. Like I've had it for a week. Me, not being able to talk. Me. I mean,
well, I'm glad you're through it.
Well, no, actually, Tony, what the joke was on my podcast this week, that my guests finally have a chance to talk, because I can't. So there's two topics I want to get into. One that you and I have not discussed either on my podcast or on this show.
Mm-hmm.
We met through a very special person.
Yes, we did.
Very special, a woman named Peggy Post, the former executive director of the Emily Post Institute. I will say this year, for those familiar with the book Emily Post Etiquette, it's still it still stands for everything courtesy, manners, etiquette. It's still the book that every other book that followed wanted to be. It is 100 years old. It was written in 1922. I do know that the family is issuing the 20th edition of the etiquette book this year. And to have Peggy Post as my friend and as my supporter and in my camp for so long has been a blessing of huge magnitude. And she deposited you in my life, which is,
yes,
but let's talk about, because you came from a civility background. You call yourself a civilist.
I call myself a civilist. Yes. Well, let me just make sure that nobody who's listening to you thinks that Peggy Post is 100 years old. It is the Institute and the book. Peggy is.
So you're just doing that because you're going to send her this recording and have.
Of course I am.
I know what's going on.
And Randy, we refer to her as Mrs. Post.
We call. I call her Mrs. Post.
I do too, and
I
thank
call her
you.
Mrs. Post. Yeah.
No, she's always very kind. We've been in touch recently, and I met Peggy when I was actually on book tour for one of my manners books. It was about 10 years ago, and I was so intimidated to meet the descendant of Emily Post, and I thought, even though I'm generally well behaved, I was just going to completely mess up. But she is, she's such a gracious person. She made me feel so comfortable. She's so real. That's one of the things I really love about her. And I think that is really her legacy in much of all this.
Well, I've done
authentic.
everything wrong. I spill things. I talk with my mouth full. I'm a disaster. I am a walking manners nightmare. And
how are we friends with you? How are we
friends
with you?
I know. I'll even do. Oh, I can't even. It's so funny. And she is so gracious and kind and so human. Because manners and etiquette. Emily had said that etiquette is making the other person comfortable. And that's Peggy. Because she really doesn't judge. My faux pas in the grand scheme of things are small. Because Peggy will judge you by your heart. And I feel comfortable and that she's judged my heart in a positive way. Because the rest of me is a disaster. You put up with me. So how did stability become your career path early on?
Well, I always like to joke that when I was growing up as a child, I told my parents, "Oh, I want to be an etiquette advice columnist," and that was not true. I wanted to be a meteorologist, so I don't really know what happened. But I started out giving a lot of advice to people. I guess I had some basic common sense, in my 20s. And then I fell into a magazine column, and all things seem to start with a magazine column. And before I knew it, I had my first book. It was the result of a blind date. I actually had been set up with a very nice man, and he collected vintage cookbooks. I collected vintage etiquette books. We both had cancer, and our friend Lori Brinker thought, "Oh, well, this will just be a great match." Well, it wasn't a great romantic match, but it was a great friendship match. And he was an art editor at HarperCollins, and he took me on and took my first book, and that was the great sardonic comedy writer David Rakoff, who has unfortunately passed from his cancer. But that kind of sort of leapfrogged me into these leagues, and from there it's been one thing after another, one problem after another.
Good segue. Are you as surprised as I am by how, as my grandma Jones would say, how hateful we've become? In a million years, I would have not told you in 2010 that we would be such a, Grandma Jones, hateful society. So judgmental. So I have to believe that the fact that people can hide, well, frankly, right now I'm still on Clubhouse, but I'm still a voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like somebody can be here to really do anything to me if I say something they don't like. Are you shocked by this level of dissension, hate?
It's really been a long time coming, and we can see from surveys about civility how we've gotten to this point, because we've become sort of increasingly dissatisfied with civil life in this country, with the way people treat each other, with the lack of basic respect, with the fact that we really don't know how to listen to people anymore. And part of that is, part of it is easy to blame social media for that. We get in our silos, we type in caps, we kind of shout. We don't have to be friends with people that we don't agree with anymore. But it's kind of easy to blame technology. We have to own our behavior. We look at politicians and we say, well, that's egregious behavior. That's egregious behavior. We have to look at what we do in our daily lives and own that and change that. And I've kind of started this new set of commitments. And one thing I'm trying to do is to be kind to someone else at least once a day. And there's actually a number of theories about the viral nature of kindness. We kind of know the viral nature of being mean and being a bully. That gets replicated. Same thing is true when we're nice to people. So if I'm nice to you, Randy, Tony, you're going to likely do something nice to someone else. And that's what we're trying to do here. We need to model that behavior and change the tone.
Yeah, I love it. If I may just jump in, a random act of kindness is
Mm-hmm.
contagious, right? We've been talking about contagion for the last 2 years. Well, we can also make
Exactly.
kindness. What we should have a pandemic of kindness, right? And just spread it everywhere because it does start with you. And I absolutely love that. And unfortunately, just before this, we're not going to get into that conversation, but just before the show started, I said that the biggest problem that we have in this country is, and the world, is we've lost the ability to have a civil discourse, to have a debate, a civil debate, and still walk away as friends, as opposed to, you're wrong and I hate you and I want you to end. And, it's just too aggressive. Yet, yes, the media has a lot to do with it. Social media has a lot to do with it, but so do our leaders, right? And that's what's happening right now. Our political
Mm-hmm.
leaders and the people that we watch on TV on a daily basis, they're so filled with so much hate and anger towards each other, which honestly, I think it's a lot of it is political theater, because I believe that half those people go out to
Mhm.
lunch afterwards anyway.
Yeah.
But they're playing so much of their base, but they're doing that, and then people at home watch that and they're like, well, I guess that's the new norm, and they do the same thing. So it starts with, that's why we are lacking strong leaders, and so I just wanted to jump in and say that. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
I'm going to point this out because I love this story. You know who else does the random act of kindness one per day?
Who?
Vanna White. Vanna White told me, and she said, I have never told this to anyone. So when I found out, Vanna said, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. I thought, oh my God, you interviewed with everybody. But on my podcast, she said she tries to do one nice thing, even if it's just letting them cut in traffic per day.
Yeah.
Now, being what we know about Vanna White, that cannot be that big a surprise.
No, it's
that
not.
she would be that kind of a person. I don't. What is it going to take to get people to? Is it think all the things my mom taught me, that my grandmother taught me, that Emily taught? Think before you speak. The golden rule. Do unto others you would have them do unto you. I'm not saying it correctly. What's it going to take to make that, to raise that consciousness so people behave better? You know what? And I'm going to point out too, I love this room. I love the people that come into this room. These are good, kind people. These are people that more than likely we're preaching to the wrong choir.
Well,
because they're the ones more likely to be kind, from my experience.
I think we all have the capacity to be kind, and we look to different role models, whether they're political leaders, whether they're celebrities. I mean, I love that about Vanna White. And the more that celebrities also model better behavior, that that helps, because that's covered. That's covered in People magazine and all the tabloids. And as much as we don't want to look there, we do look there. But we also say, well, this is so hard to do. If you look to the pandemic, we're still at the tail end of. People acted so much better during the pandemic overall, and especially at the beginning. Do you remember the fight? Remember New York City at 7 p.m. every night, people would come out and clamor and really support the first responders and provide food and other things. That's what we're talking about. It's not really a big deal, and we're not going to get there until we say that that's what we want and that's how we act. And I think we're really at that point.
Don't you at my core? I believe people are good, though. I really do. Am I naive? Am I naive to think that at my core people are good?
I would never say that you're not naive, Randy. but I do think people are at their core good. I think that and here's again where the pandemic has not been our friend. We've been isolated. We're lonely. We're dealing with all sorts of societal problems, from inflation, from war in Ukraine, so on and so forth. That kind of just raises the temperature. And I have, I've found, I have snapped at various times when normally I don't think that I would have. And it's been, I've been kind of surprised. And then I try to own it and apologize. But it's a challenging time. And the mental health problems are really increasing the past several years, and that has a big impact too.
One of the things that I have said, my children are 31 and 33, that I truly don't think we've invented a new way to misbehave. So we're so critical of the millennials and the younger kids. Well, we were being criticized too. I'm 60 this year. We were being criticized. I think we're always criticizing kids, but I'm going to give you an example, because this really did surprise me. I was teaching a class on storytelling to a corporate group, and I had one of the students, and I believe my public speaking, my storytelling classes are based on positive reinforcement, what you do right.
Mm-hmm.
I try to emphasize more what you do right to really build upon those, because so much of that is just making them feel good about themselves. So I have a student call me because she came in. She did not do the assignment correctly. She wasn't, in fact, telling the story. She made an introduction, but she did not include the story. And I said, you know what? You're not including the story. You're not actually doing what we had wanted. Why don't you sit down and we'll come back to you? So we, one by one, every student gets up and they do the assignment wrong. And I discovered that every single one of them has not read the article that I gave them and is winging it. Every single one of them. There's no preparation whatsoever. They ran in at the last minute to do it, and therefore, since they didn't pay attention, they all did it wrong. And I'm going politely from person to person, explaining that you did this wrong. I have student number one call me, and she starts, well, I just wanted to share with you that this is how you made me feel. And I went, oh my God, really? And I'm being nice. I'm being nice, but I'm hearing what I believe we have taught and I appreciate the approach rather than hacking. This is how I felt. But in my mind, I'm going, seriously? Basically, the cheater is calling me and telling me that I made her feel bad for cheating. I mean, that's the way I saw it. And I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? I was very nice, and I explained to me, I said, how do you think I felt when 7 people, one after the other, got up and disrespected my time and did not do what they had agreed to do?
And did she answer you? What was her answer to that?
She engaged in a really good conversation. I mean, she's real. And that's the thing, she's such a good person. They're all lovely people, every single person. But I was shocked that she actively made an excuse for simply not doing the work that she was supposed to do, and telling me how I made her feel. And I was nice. Her feelings were based on her experience. She made those up on her own. I mean, she was feeling guilty because she didn't do it right. I knew that I didn't do that.
Well, we also tend to live in a victim society these days. Everybody's, got to be offended by something. Doesn't matter what you're saying. Somebody's going to be offended by it. And everybody's a victim. And again, that's kind of being propagated, unfortunately, by leadership. So it's an interesting, actually, conversation to have today and every day. So loving it.
Yeah, I don't, Randy, though, I don't know how much it's generational, because I'll be the first to admit, when I was in college, I was not the student that necessarily I would like to have had, where I teach. I went into class often unprepared, so on and so forth. And so I tend not to think that sort of the generational blame game is very helpful in either direction, because often, Gen Z and so on, they will blame boomers, et cetera, for much of the world's problems, and we are responsible for much of them. But that doesn't get us anywhere. And blaming them by generation, I think just kind of reaching out and making connection with someone and having conversations that matter, where you get to express yourself and where, in this case, she does. That's how we change people.
I found it so surprising that it happened, because it's probably the first time that I actually saw an example of what I thought was something that was actively being taught to a younger generation that was probably not taught to me, because it was just a surprise. What topics, when you're discussing civility, what topics what's coming up the most these days?
Well,
we complain a lot. I'm complaining, okay? I'm raising my hand. I'm admitting. I'm complaining. Everybody's so mean. Boo, boo, boo. I'm going to take my toys and go home. I'm complaining. We're all complaining about how rude and mean and awful everything is. And I'm joining that group right now and admitting to that. I'm begging you to tell us what you're talking about right now that is helping people get beyond that.
Well, what I am talking and writing about a lot these days is language, and why language matters. And so that gets kind of controversial pretty quickly, because if you're on the right, and and you will then be accusing me of being woke or overly woke in terms of talking about language, and and some on the left also don't like this. But I'm very much a believer in using words that convey respect. So, for instance, if someone is transgender and they have changed their name or they've changed their pronouns, they may be using they, them, and their instead of he or she. Even if it's new to us, even if it's unfamiliar to us, we should follow their lead. Language evolves. We evolve as people, and for so long, those who have written the dictionary and really been in charge and in control of our language have been the established power elites, which have generally been white men, and so that is shifting, or that has shifted. That kind of provides part of the angst in between. But so there is a letting go of power, and there's kind of a new power source that is coming with how we refer to ourselves and the kind of words that we use to describe ourselves.
Is it safe to say that think before you speak is still a really, really, really good idea?
Think before you speak, but also listen before you speak. Again, we talked a little bit about this, but we're not such great listeners. We often don't even bother to listen. And I think there's so much to be gained in any kind of communication by listening. I'm listening carefully to you today, and you too, Tony.
Well, and the other thing that I've heard more and more came up on my podcast recently, actually Aaron Brockovich brought it up on my podcast recently, that we are listening to respond, not listening to understand.
Yeah.
I believe that to be very true.
Yeah. And I think we participate in conversations so that we'll just have enough of the moment to be cogent in some sort of reply, whether it's snarky or not, rather than what are they trying to say? What is someone trying to communicate to me? And then engaging on that level. And we need to go a little bit deeper. And we need, part of it is a vulnerability. We need to find ways to be more vulnerable with each other. And I think we're afraid to do that, in part because we've kind of built up defenses, and in part, if you make a mistake these days, you can be attacked, and that's a scary proposition. And as a public speaker myself, I'm much more concerned about saying something that could be misinterpreted today than 5 years ago. And so I listen harder as a result.
Oh, I'm a touchy-feely, huggy guy, and it's ruined me. Between that and the pandemic, it's ruined me. I mean, yeah, I just love to give everybody a hug.
Well, you know what it is? Go ahead. Sorry, Randy.
No. Go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say we're living part of a cancel culture, which is another problem. Is everyone's so overly sensitive that if somebody says, because we have to remember, there is the right of free speech within limitations, of course. Yet sometimes just because someone doesn't agree with you, the other side, it's a kill culture. Everyone attacks you, and that's kind of that double-edged sword of social media. You can be destroyed because someone misinterpreted what you said, and today with editing software and everything else, they can just show the snippets that make you sound like a monster or take things out of context. So we do live in an interesting time. Yet I do believe that when you speak your mind, the people, they say your vibe attracts your tribe. Well, when you speak your truth, regardless of whether it's popular with one side or the other, you're going to bring the people to you that believe and have the same ideologies as you and everything else. Yet so many people are so afraid of being canceled, and they are. There's people that have their Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts shut down because someone decided that they disagreed with that language, and all these fact checkers that we're not even going to get into that. They just shut people down. So people are afraid to speak out, and that's why oftentimes people are pretending to be someone they're not, because they're afraid if they speak out, they're going to get canceled.
I had an epiphany this week, and I love it that I'm almost 60 and I still have epiphanies, and they make me happy. I had Allie Landry, the Doritos girl, Allie Landry, on my podcast this week, and we were talking about one of the discussions we had was that, it was last week. Linda Spellman, who has written a book, and she's coming on our show next week. So sorry, Linda Spellman and I were having this discussion about that it's fear is caused by what you don't know. What you don't know or understand causes fear. And I realized my epiphany was I fear that I won't know or I won't understand. And I had never verbalized that before. I realized that my work here with Amelia, my work on Jones Fett Show, my podcast, is my fear that I'm not going to know. my fear that I'm not going to be smart enough, my fear that I'm not going to understand, my fear that I'm not going to show support, my fear that that I'm not going to learn everything I want to learn, my fear that I'm not going to accomplish what I want to accomplish, and my fear that I'm not going to help the people I want to help.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not say anything to brag. I throw myself under every bus too. So I'm not bragging, but I just wish that now that I had this epiphany, I want to find a way to share that epiphany with the world.
Well,
Fear can lead to wonderful things if you want to overcome the fear by gaining knowledge.
But fear can really hold us back, as you're indicating, and prevent us from reaching out, from getting close to people, and from taking chances. That is part of what life is about as well. And I think there's just so much fear in this country now. It's really a societal. It's frightening.
Yeah, fear keeps
Tony,
people.
Do a quick room reset because I actually know I've got a segue.
Absolutely. Yeah, fear keeps people in their comfort zone. So they're afraid to get out of that comfort zone and open their mind to another thought, another idea. But we need to free our minds, free our voices, and feel free to go explore, to go learn, to go have that conversation, that uncomfortable conversation. So love that. Love this conversation. Speaking of conversations. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to everybody that's on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn watching us live. By the way, if you're on Clubhouse, you could just follow me or Randy and on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn and find this stream so you can watch us, not just listen to us. For those of you on Clubhouse, we thank you for being here. We encourage you, of course, both on social media and on Clubhouse to share this conversation, share this room, invite people to partake in this conversation. I know a few friends of mine have already shared this video out, so thank you for doing that. On Clubhouse, make sure that you're clicking the little box at the bottom and share this room to your hallway so it's easier for people to find us. Ping some people into this conversation as well, the ones that you know could and should be here that need to hear this, that need to hear that smart versus stupid conversation, perhaps the things that you don't want to do, you shouldn't do as you get older. So, and we're going to get into that a little deeper in this next half hour. So thank you so much for being here. And of course, we encourage you to click the link up at the top. It is pinned, Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old. You can find that on Amazon. So the link to Amazon is pinned up there. And if you could, Tara, also pin that to on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and all those other spots so people can find us. Matter of fact, I'm going to change the banner. I just realized that we still have the Design Genius banner going underneath our screen here. I'm going to go ahead and change that temporarily as well. So again, thank you all for joining us, and let's carry on with this incredible conversation with the one and only Steven and Randy.
I said, let's call this smart versus stupid. And I realized that some people probably think, oh, Steven is the smart one and Randy is the stupid one. Well, I can't completely argue with that. Yeah.
Oh. I don't think we're on a reality show here, and there's not someone who's going to be pissed off, Randy or Tony. And Tony, thank you for mentioning the book. It's actually just a year now that it's been published, and as a writer, it's always very gratifying to see how many people I've reached and to see how conversations have originated from that book, which is really about trying to make smarter decisions as we get older and to understand those decision points.
There is something came up just now when I jump in because I'm all excited. You know what? Here's the sad thing is I have to listen to understand and I have to listen to respond. I realize I don't have a choice. Doing what I do, I got to be able to do both. But you said something about language and using language that respects the person earlier. There is one of my favorite stories and Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old is the caregiver for your father referring to him as professor. I remember this.
Yes.
Because he'd been retired for quite some time, but by referring to him as professor, she was respecting how he saw himself. And they had this wonderful relationship. And it's just one of my favorite stories from this book.
Yeah, I'll just tell a little bit more about that. I hear my dog is starting to bark. But,
we never know. Yeah, my dog, Alexander, has no problem joining the conversation here either. So we're good. We're good.
But my dad had taught journalism at NYU for, I think, 25 or 30 years. And he was always referred to as Professor Petrow. And you could see when he was working, he would just light up that way. And then he retired. He had an illness, and yeah, which really restricted his life. And my mom and my siblings and I, we really tried to be respectful of him. We tried to help him in many ways. He was stubborn. He was angry. He was hurting, and we were not being very successful. And then as you mentioned, we had a new health aide, and one day she just referred to him as Professor Petrow. And I guess she'd seen a diploma or some award in his study, and he lit up again. And I could see that by that use of language, he felt like the person he had been, who had been so respected, was being made visible again. And so this aide, whenever she needed or wanted him to do something, which normally he just would have said no, she would refer to him as professor, and he would say yes. Now, my brother and sister and I, we did not start calling him professor, but we did see really sort of the impact of helping him to see that we continue to see him as a full person, in the way that he had been. And I think we all want to be seen, and we all want to be seen for the full range of who we are, and we can lose sight of that for all.
Let me tell you, I live in Naples, Florida. I mean, I am surrounded by people begging to be relevant. I am surrounded by people who were big shots at one point in time, and they still want to be treated that way. They don't always earn the right to be treated that way, but they certainly want it. Relevance, feeling that you have purpose, feeling that you're needed, that you're wanted. I'm so aware of that. Okay, so let me do my commercial for you, how much I love this book. You can be quiet for a minute because I love the book, and you'll let me do the commercial. I am, as I said, almost 60. My mother passed away a few years ago. I live in a community where loss is really part of my almost daily life. Somebody I know I'm losing. I lost someone named Myra Daniels, who was the catalyst for my first interview 10 years ago when I started doing these interviews. I lost her this week. So my father is 91. He lives on his own. I'm so aware of loss. I'm so aware of, wow, I don't keep it if I don't think my kids are going to want it. I'm only 60.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, I said, if I don't really think you're going to want it at some point in time, I'm not going to keep it. This book to me opened a conversation that I think is so critically important, not just about how I want to age, the stupid things I don't want to do. And we've also discovered I do many, many, many stupid things. But I think it helps you to help your elderly parents. And you may be 35 or 40, and I'm sorry, but you know what? It's not too early to start, thinking about reading books like this and becoming aware of trying to be the best support system you can be for your parents in the future. So I want to thank you for the book. I will laughingly say to you, I told you I was going to say where I couldn't find it, I didn't know where it was. I put it was on my husband's nightstand where it is set for like 6 months, meaning he's not read it. So the stupid one, Derek's not here to hear it, is him for not reading this book yet. So that's where I found it. Cliff notes of why you wrote it so that I can get into some of the meat of the book.
Well, so I soon after I turned 50, and I'm 64 now, I saw my parents kind of beginning to enter this new chapter of their lives, and they were making various decisions that I thought were not actually in their own best interest. I mean, they were some sillier things like, well, they weren't really silly, but like my mother was very much into how her home looked, and she did not want to rearrange anything or even pick up some of the throw rugs, although my dad kept tripping on them and falling. And then she, refused to give up driving, even though she was almost hitting people and so on. So I started keeping this list of things that I wasn't going to do, and it was really meant to be pledges to myself when I became a little bit older. And then I wrote an essay in the New York Times about this, and it went viral, as they say. And I got about 200 lists from other people doing very much the same thing. Stupid things they weren't going to do. It was hilarious. There was a lot of overlap. But I could see that we were a generation that was trying to be smarter, do smarter than our parents. And so that's how the book came to be. And those are the kind of conversations that, that we've had. It's kind of funny. I don't think you can see it. So I'm going to see if this works. So this step ladder is right here. And the first time I had to implement one of these was about a year ago, and I have this bookshelf behind me, and I needed to get a book off the top. And so I got on the desk and I got another foot on the chair, and I'm jumping up in the air trying to reach this book. And I go, that is one of those stupid things, Stephen. Stop it. And there's a step ladder right in the closet. So today, it turned out, just serendipitously, I needed a book from there too. I didn't even think about it. I went and got the step ladder. And so these are kind of the decisions we might not think about, but they're little trade-offs where, okay, maybe it's impacting me a little bit. It's infringing on my 30-something self, but it's helping me to stay independent, helping me to stay uninjured. And so there are lots of little decisions that we make every day that can help us live better and smarter. And so,
oh yeah, Ken Jones been changing a light bulb on his own, and he fell down. My dad did. My dad's in great shape, and I'm like, Dad, I work at home alone. I shouldn't be changing a light bulb.
yeah,
By myself. You know,
My-
what
my-
are you doing? He wants
my
to
next
go
door
say-
neighbor, this book about him because because he's now 80, and he asked me one day, would you hold the ladder for me while I go clean my gutter? I said, no, I'm not going to hold the ladder for you while you go clean your gutters. We each have a young man. His name is Eli. He's 17. We'll hold the ladder for him while he cleans our gutters. And then my neighbor said, okay. And then he went up to his mountain house, decided to saw down a tree all by himself. The tree fell on him. It was not a good thing. So, we have to make adjustments. But the reason is, if we want to stay a part of this, we want to stay connected, in metaphoric and literal ways.
I'm going to say a few of my favorites. Because this could go on forever, because I do want to open this up, because we've got the courtesy conversation, we've got the conversation about this brilliant book. I'm going to say a few of my favorite things that you said in the book, and you get to pick one. My favorite is I won't pass up a chance to pee. I lived that one. That one's a big one. I won't pass up a chance to pee. I won't limit myself to friends my own age.
Mm-hmm.
Stay rooted in the here and now and not obsess over all those what ifs. I won't play the age card. I found that very interesting. I like some other comments. Oh, I did treat him as an adult. Oh, you know what? This is the one I'm most likely to have a problem with. This is a quote by you. I also like to think that by staying active and engaged, I will always have a huge supply of stories to tell from last week and last month, and not have to rely on the ones from the last century for small talk. I can only maximize my Pat Benatar singing telegram story. I've already told it for 40 years. I think I'm almost out of time.
But you're always interviewing new people. You're always interviewing new people and have new stories ready. So you're on top of your game.
Well, you know what? And I'm saying that sarcastically, because I do have new stories all the time. All the time. But I'm very, very lucky. So pick one and go into it and talk about it.
Well, I just want to acknowledge we have Robert and Dana especially being very active.
Robert and Dana are fired up.
I know. And, I'm not agreeing with everything, but like Dana just said, I'm not getting old. I guess maybe he or she is talking about old state of mind, but we are also sort of increasing in years. But it's really how we understand that and how we can start to make better associations with being older. We kind of think of being old as decrepit, gray, frail, rather than wise, active, and so on. But the ones that you mentioned, Randy, I think what really strikes me is the importance of having intergenerational friendships. Mm-hmm. I think anytime you're just with one cohort, you start to get limited. And there's studies that show that if you're older or if you're younger and you have friends that are older and younger than you, there's just so much more going on. You're able to share experiences. You're able to have new experiences. And there's a sociologist who has come up with this wonderful term. It's called being a perennial. So instead of being a Zer or a millennial or a boomer, perennials are curious. Perennials are engaged. You can be a perennial at any age. You can be a perennial at 25, 50. You can still be a perennial at 80. And I think that is the way all of us should want to be, can want to be, and it kind of takes away some of these generational divides that we were talking about earlier, and helps us to stay active, engaged, and happy, and feel like we have worth and that we're providing sustenance to others in certain ways.
Would that be Gina Pell by any chance?
That would be Gina Pell.
So I'm kind of showing off that I have it in my notes because that's actually the perennial thing is absolutely one of my favorite aspects of this. Fascinating for me that happened recently. Sound like a commercial for me, but my first fiction book comes out. Mark Victor Hansen from Chicken Soup for the Soul is publishing it. It's called Ruby. It comes out in the fall. And I live in a community where I'm youngish. I'm sliding up the scale, but I'm still youngish. So having relationships and friendships at different ages is much more difficult to do where I am. I'm lucky 2 of my best friends are my children. They're great. But I have to point out one of the aspects of this book is that, and this is what Mark Victor Hansen wanted, he asked me to do, every character was above age 60. Every main character was above the age of 60. They all live, laugh, learn, and love, proving that still happens beyond the age of 60. But what's interesting about all these beta readers who read it, guess what age group is getting into it the most? The youngsters. The 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, and the 40-somethings are the ones that are finding all the subtext. And the ones and they're not reading a book about old people, because I didn't write a book about old people. They just happen to be that age. And that was such a big epiphany for me that my younger friends were getting my work on a level that I didn't anticipate. Extraordinary. And had I not given them the chance, I mean, initially it's like, oh yeah, my audience is 45 plus. That's it. I was so wrong.
Well, I was surprised too with this book because when it came out, I thought the audience was really going to be mostly 55 plus, and then I've done a lot of bookstore events and public talks over the year, and there've really been sort of 2 distinct groups. There've been 55 plus, and then there've really been like 30 to 55, and they're the kids of their parents, and often they've come together and they've used the conversation in the book to have conversations and to start conversations between themselves. And you know this, Randy, about me. I try to bring humor into a lot of these topics because they're kind of hard: aging, disability, vanity, illness, death, and dying. And so there is a lot of humor in here, but it's a way to open things up and make things a little bit less scary. And and I've made myself vulnerable in this book in part so that others can follow suit and realize, okay.
Oh, you were honest. You were honest to a fault. Yes.
I am honest to a fault, and and don't go where I think you're going.
I'm not doing it. I would
Tony,
I
talk in the book about erectile dysfunction. I own it. But Randy really made a banner headline out of it last year.
Oh, that's funny. No, listen, I love the fact that you put this book, and I can't wait to get it, because the reality of it is the people who need to read it are the 30 to 55 so that they can start making those pivots and those corrections before they get there, right? That's why you wrote the book, not just to let people know, but to kind of forewarn. They say forewarned is forearmed, right? Yeah, exactly. And knowledge is potential power. If you know, at least if you screw it up, you screwed it up.
I want to open this up. I mean, like I said, these shows can always last hours. Please, everybody in the room, give us thoughts and questions you may have for Steven Petrow. I'm kidding. Tony, you start. What question do you have for Steven? And then we're going to allow people from the room to jump in and ask a question.
Fantastic. And by the way, I prefer that you put your question, send it to Tara, or put your question in the chat so we can kind of go in order so that we don't have an unruly unmiking of 1,000 people at once. So
I will let you guide that process, and I will just smile and be happy and appreciative.
All right. Well, and I'm going to allow Tara to message me so that we know who to pick up. So listen, fantastic. So let me ask you the question that I guess I have is, what is that one thing that you're like, there's just, obviously you have a whole bunch of things in this book, and I love that you had other people come in and write 200 lists and send you stuff. What's that one or two top, or say that your top 3, to not limit you to one? What are those top 3 things that you're like, hell no, I've done it before and definitely not going to do it, and nobody should do it? What would those be?
It's the P one. It's the P one.
That's a good one.
That is Randy's takeaway. The P1, which is go to the bathroom, even if you don't think you have to. That is more male oriented than female oriented. I want to note that. So, and I learned that lesson when I was on the 405 in Los Angeles, and tried to use a Coke bottle as a pee bottle, and that was kind of a disaster. So yes, I've learned that. But one of the ones that has had a lot of resonance is the chapter that's called "I Won't Join the Organ Recital," and the organ recital, to tell those not familiar with that phrase, is you tend to get a group of people 50 or 55 plus, and the conversation when we were younger would be like, what's happening in our jobs, what's happening with our kids, where did we go on vacation? Now they're like, what's happening with our bodies? And I've got an ache here. I'm going to the doctor for this. I've got sciatica, and so on and so forth. And it kind of like spirals and snowballs, so that it seems like all we are our ailments. And the problem with that is we're not. But studies have shown that the more we define ourselves that way, the more we talk about ourselves that way, the more we think about ourselves that way, and that's kind of the negative associations with aging, and that cuts our life short. Our longevity can be up to 7.5 years shorter if we think that aging is a negative thing. So we kind of really want to break out of that, and I say limit conversations about illness or aches and pains, to one drink, and then move on. And especially if they're younger people around, we don't want them just to say, "Oh, that's who these people are. They're ill, they're infirm," rather than they're active, they're vibrant, they're doing things, they're volunteering, so on and so on.
I'm raising my hand, saying it's easy to get sucked into that conversation. I'm admitting that. I live in Naples, Florida. I've been part of an organ recital.
But you can stop and redirect any conversation, Randy. So
I have taught myself.
Yeah, I actually love that one because I often say that getting old is great. It is the aging that sucks, right? But we're not going to talk about those aches and pains because the reality is where focus goes, energy flows, right? So the more you focus on what hurts, the more stuff you're going to find that hurts. So best to focus on what doesn't hurt. Best to focus on the solution, not the problem. So I love that one.
And Tony, that actually kind of raises another thought that I talk a lot about in the book, which is we tend to conflate aging and illness as though they are one thing. Aging is like a natural state. Illness is a disease state, and they're not the same. And so illness is our enemy. Aging is not necessarily our enemy. It's when they might overlap, but we need to think about them differently. There's so many vibrant people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s,
100%,
and so on. And and it's when they become ill that the world gets a little bit darker and smaller, but not just by getting chronologically older.
Yeah, again, it's the aging part, but the aging is great.
So what questions do we have, Tara? Do you have Tara sent you anything?
Yeah, she hasn't yet, but I am going to say just one thing to that. The reality of it is when what we focus on, we get, right. There was something else I was going to say to what you said, and it just fell out of my head right now. But yeah, just think younger.
You're getting old, Tony.
Yeah, this is true. This is one of my things. Listen, this is why I'm normally writing things down, like even if it's just a one-word thing, so I can come back to it. That's okay. Listen,
lists are definitely our friend.
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. And and if you think yourself, you can think yourself sick. That's what I was going to say. Disease is actually dis-ease. So when you have unanswered things, or really, it's about forgiving, letting go of stuff. Because the more anger and resentment you hold, the more uneasy your life is. The more unease, the more dis-ease you feel, and the more disease you get. So that's what I was going to share. So Tara, I don't know if we've got someone, or let's see if we've got anything in the chat, or if somebody just wants to unmic and ask a question from what you've heard over the last 50 minutes or so. This has just been such a great segment, and I'm really enjoying the knowledge and conversation. Can't wait to get into this book. By the way, link is pinned at the top. Make sure you're clicking it and ordering it today so you can also be smarter versus, stupid.
So,
hi, Randy. This is Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Hello, Corey, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. I'm sorry I didn't write my question in the chat, but I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, and so I work with a lot of different age groups, and I'm also in the construction industry. And in that industry, we're finding that we have more generations of people working together than we've ever had before. And so the language of communication that is happening at each level of generation is very different. And I'm finding that it's really hard for those in older generations to be able to understand some of the language usage of the younger generation. And so there becomes an intimidation to actually be able to speak because you're worried about offending someone, but at the same time, you're not used to using language that way. How do you address that?
Well, that's a really good point, Corey. And and sometimes we're not even talking about language among younger people because look at how we text. It can be all emojis and emoticons. And I know for many people that's like, wow, what is that? They're not even words, and so on. I'm very much a believer in building bridges, which means that both generations need to come together and again we need to listen and we need to ask questions when we don't understand. I know my generation, we had certain slang that our parents didn't understand, and in part that was to kind of sort of define ourselves in a certain way and to be separate. But and so there's a little bit of that going on, but we need to ask. Urban Dictionary is like this great resource when you don't know what something means to go look it up and see what it actually means. But asking is really helpful, and that can lead to another kind of conversation where we learn a little bit.
Thank you so much for the question. Tara posted one right here. What are you focused on within the next 6 months? Biggest goal, and how can people reach out to you? That's actually 3 questions.
That's 3 questions. So
that's 3.
Those are great questions. So people can reach out to me. I have a website. It's my name, stevenpetrow.com. And there's contact information there. I'm working on a new book. So that's going to take me a little bit longer than 6 months, but I recently signed a contract with Random House, and it's a book about joy, finding it, cultivating it, and sharing it. And in part, it comes out of this book. This book's one of the lessons that I learned, and so I'm really excited to be working on that. It's due next summer, and then Randy, it'll be out in the summer of 2024. So I hope to be on your podcast again. Though.
You will be on my podcast, I'm sure, probably before then.
And then so my biggest goal, my biggest goal is that's my my biggest professional goal. I recently was at a retreat in Mexico. It's a wonderful place called the Modern Elder Academy.
Chip Conley, he's on the show.
Chip Conley, yeah.
And actually, I will say Chip Conley's show on my podcast is consistently just one of the highest rated shows ever.
Well, he's an
amazing, top of my list all the time.
He's an amazing person. He's an amazing teacher. And that this workshop was really about learning how to be more vulnerable with others and how to sort of, we all have like these tapes in our head that are, let's just say, not always the most positive. They're critical. And, but everyone has them. And so part of this was like sharing them and realizing the universality of all of that and helping to diminish them and finding ways, ways to connect. And Randy, one of the exercises, maybe we'll have to do this sometime, it was like taking a partner and looking into their eyes for 25 minutes. Now, I found this incredibly difficult, and apparently I fell asleep sitting up with my eyes open because I didn't hear like the whole second part of it. It was that intimidating, but little practice, it really kind of helps you see into people in new ways. So it was a cool exercise.
I think I could do that. My husband would rather die. It would never happen. He would be like, no, I'm gone. Find me at the bar. It would never happen. But I think I could. Look, I love what Dana just wrote on social media. I wake up and shout for joy every day. It helps start the day. And I get a visual on that. That's a pretty sweet visual.
Well, and one of my takeaways from the Modern Elder Academy is, and this is not narcissistic, but I look in the mirror, I look in my eyes in the mirror every morning, and I say, good morning, I love you, I trust you, let's go have a good day. But it's kind of a starting point for connection that hopefully I'm going to be able to share with others.
I wake up in the morning and I look at the dog and say it's 5:30. You little, I don't have quite the same start in life.
Randy, we'll FaceTime in the morning. And, I'll look at your eyes. And Tony, you're welcome to join.
Well, listen, people say, well, I don't have a morning routine. Yeah, you do. It probably just doesn't serve you. But I do love that because, and I was sharing that this morning in another room that I do. We were doing a room on forgiveness in the morning, and one of the things I share all the time is to do that mirror work, to look in the mirror and tell yourself, I appreciate you, I forgive you, I accept you, I love you, whatever it is. But while you're doing that, it's not just looking in the mirror, because most people just look in the mirror, they look at their hair, they glance at their eyes, they look at their ears, their wrinkles, their teeth, maybe that's extra skin, the way that they look and everything else. But seldom do they look at the mirror. Seldom do you look at the mirror and look in your eyes for more than 2 or 3 seconds. So I'm going to challenge everybody that's here. And friend, if you haven't done this, look at yourself in the mirror and do not break contact for at least a minute. A minute. It's only 60 seconds. But say the words, right? I appreciate you. I accept you. I forgive you. I'm proud of you. Whatever it is you long to hear from other people, do that. It will change your life. And the longer you do it, so I've never done it for 20 minutes, Steven. So I will absolutely accept that challenge. It will change your life. I saw a field combat medic, 27-year field combat medic in the field, break down in front of me after looking in the mirror for just 5 minutes. And he says, Tony, I haven't seen myself in 20 years. Matter of fact, there hasn't been a mirror in my house in 15.
Right.
Because he was ashamed of who looked back. So the act of looking in the mirror, that mirror work, is so freaking powerful. I'm so glad you brought that up, Steven.
And I'm just going to mention one last thing, because I know we're just about out of time. So another thing that I've been doing that came out of the MEA, Modern Elder Academy, is this is it's a mindfulness journal, but basically it's a gratitude journal. And so every day, no matter what, I write down 2 or 3 things that I'm grateful for before I go to bed. And it really, it makes me think of the positive. Because, we all have negative things that happen during the day, or that we're vexing and this and that. But to go to sleep on a positive note, being grateful for the people in your life, my dog, a beautiful day. It can be small things, it can be big things. There's so many studies that show that this has a positive impact on our psychology. So, if there are 2 things to take away from this, it's the mirror work, and it's finding ways to express gratitude.
Yeah, and gratitude is another key. I mean, forgiveness, gratitude, that mirror work. If you write down, I promise you, and this is another challenge, I challenge everybody to do this. Write down 3 things you're grateful for every night. And it could be the same thing, preferably add 3 new things. And when you do that at night, you'll also sleep better, because you'll go to sleep thinking about those things that you want, instead of going to bed thinking about the bills or that thing that isn't going right, the things that keep you up at night. I love to say that I don't care what keeps you up at night. I want to know what wakes you up in the morning, because plenty of stuff will keep you up at night. But writing down your gratitude at night sets you up for a restful sleep and more pleasant dreams. And then starting in the morning saying, what are you grateful for, also gives you a better day. And the challenge is this. If you would wake up tomorrow with only the things you were grateful for today, what would you have left?
It's a great question.
We're at 11:59. Okay, I will say this, that Amelia gets on to me that I never talk about it. I talk about the fact I have a podcast, but I actually never tell anybody how to get there. It is literally jones.show. On every podcast platform. I am very blessed. So many of these people that come on to this show, a lot of the guests on this show have been on my podcast. That's how I meet them. And I bring them in here. So if you're curious about that, jones.show, stevenpetrow.com. I adore this man. I adore you so much. I am so profoundly grateful for the work you do, and for someone who does work that really can have such a positive impact on people. Stupid things I won't do when I get old, I think is epic. I really do. I think it has a conversation. I'm not shy about this. I said this to you. I think it's a conversation that has to be had, and it's had in a truthful, whimsical, interesting way. And I'm so glad that you wrote it. So to Robert and Dana on social, my God, the Robert and Dana show would be epic. Epic if they had their own podcast. Robert and Dana on social media, you need your own podcast. Tony, transfer us out of here.
Fantastic. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steven, thank you. And just stay on after. We'll kill the broadcast, and we'll stay on for a minute afterwards. But thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Steven, for coming on, sharing your time, sharing your wisdom, sharing your not just a piece of your mind, but a piece of your heart. Thank you for being here. Make sure that you're clicking that link above to order the book. And if you're watching on social media or YouTube or LinkedIn, I actually put the website for stevenpetrow.com, so you can find him there as well. Make sure that you're following Randy, of course, on jones.show.
Petrow.
Petrow, darn it, Petrow.
Like petroleum sort of.
Listen,
Petrow.
I will so get it the next time. So make sure that you're StevenPetrow.com. Check him out. Of course, find Randy as well. And of course, you can go to Amelia.com as well, order her book. And you can also find me at Get Up and Grow, the way you see it on my name, getupandgrow.com. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Make sure you're joining us next Friday. We have that 9 o'clock show, and we have another at 11 o'clock. Great guest coming next week. Make sure that you're joining us.
Spellman, actually, Linda Spellman.
Yeah.
A very, 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 very dear friend of mine will be our guest at 11 o'clock next week. She's fascinating.
Fantastic. So we look forward to that. I'm going to end the stream on social media right now. So thank you all for being here. Make sure that you're sharing this show as well.